I still can remember clearly the memories from 20 years ago. At first, I thought that was the sounds of the bird. But later my grandma told me it was the sounds of gibbons singing. I love to explore the forest with barefoot, collect the wild fruits, and climb to the roof of my house, then sit there, just watching and enjoy the green view of the forest in my backyard. One day, it was only my mom and I at home, when my house was caught in the fire because of electrical short circuit. And it was 3 a.m. My mother and I managed to escape from the blazing flames that engulfed our wooden house and burned all my favorite things. And back then I was only a little girl wearing pajama and shouting, weeping, "My clothes, Mom, my clothes!" It's not okay to see your home burn. But the fact is, the same thing is happening right now. All dear excellencies and distinguished guests from all across the world. My name is Emmanuela Shinta, a woman from Dayak Mainan tribe. My homeland, Kalimantan, is the original habitat of orangutans, one of the ancient rainforests which is more than 140 million years old. It has a lot of natural biodiversity and resources, and my people, Dayak people, are the first people of the land. There are more than 400 different sub-tribes, and we speak 400 different languages. Such a beautiful and rich culture. And Kalimantan once was dubbed as the lung of the world. But I'm dubbed if the title still fits in. In 2015, Kalimantan had been the hottest and the most polluted island in the world. It was caused by huge forest and pit fire that destroyed more than 800,000 hectares area in my homeland. I have gone to the areas where fires burn 3 meters to 5 meters under the ground and produce thick haze, which contain amount of carbon emissions that could make you collapse in less than a few minutes. And in 2015, carbon emissions that released by pit fire in Kalimantan exceeded the entire US economy at the same period. The air pollution was equal to smoking 672 cigarettes a day. And I saw our elders, our children, dying. Even I lost my voice for 3 weeks because of smoke inhalation. And I want you to know, ladies and gentlemen, it has happened not only for 1 year or a few years. It has happened since 1997. It never feels okay to see your own home burn. But we haven't given up. I believe the ancient wisdoms are the key to save this planet. That's a wisdom that have been keeping forests for 1,000 years, and it cannot be replaced by technology. However, technology can be very effective to support the restorations of the ecosystem and to enhance our responsibility as humans. And I say this is where my generation played a role. The indigenous wisdoms that we received from our ancestors, combined with skills, knowledge, and education, that can be very powerful tool to make a change and create a better future. And 3 years ago, together with other fellow young people in Kalimantan, I started an indigenous initiative-based organization named Ranu Welum Foundations, which means living water, and launched Youth Act, a movement that called for all young people to speak on behalf of their communities, stand for their rights, and protect the forest. We created the first haze protection shelter in Indonesia. We use videos and films to bring our stories and be heard by government and global audience. We also train young people to be activists, and they can use their platform to speak about climate change and human rights. We replant the trees and forests in the area that have been burned. We speak in national and global forum, bring wisdoms from our elders, and demand to the policymakers to involve the local communities in policymaking. Don't bring the alien concept only to justify your project. That's what we say. and we educate next generations, pass them the teaching of our ancestors and connections to the Mother Earth, because we believe the children may be only 27% of the world's populations, but they are 100% of the world's future. We, young people in Kalimantan, have been rising from the ashes. Ladies and gentlemen, there are many times I want to give up and feeling hopeless and helpless. But every time I want to quit this battle, I'm thinking about my sisters, my brothers, my fathers, my mothers, my elders, and the most important is the generations that will come after me. What kind of future that I want to give to them? What kind of future that I want our children to have? And while there's an uncertainty, one thing that for sure, it must be better than what I have today. Then, I clench my heart once again, gather all my strength and courage, and to stand here before all of you, even though my feet are trembling and my voice is shaking, I want to say the same words just like what Greta Thunberg says. We have to act as our house in the fire. And the fact is, yes, our house is in the fire right now. This is a message from me, Emmanuela Shinta, a Dayak woman from the jungle of Borneo. Once again, I dream to wake up in the morning and listen to the sounds of gibbon singing once again. And I believe in the collaboration and partnership, and REDD+ can be one of the key solutions to climate change mitigation and adaptation, provided that it respects and aligns with indigenous and local communities' rights, needs, and interests. This can only be done through bottom-up approach by fully involving and giving leadership to the community, because I believe each of us has a role to play. Where is the best place to start? Here. And when is the best time to act? Now. Me, you, us, we are the power. Terima kasih Hane Tabe sa mantenanyo.
What an inspiring call. Thank you so much, Emmanuela. And now let's take a walk down memory lane. We have 10 years to go down. And just to have a better idea of what has happened in the last 10 years. And to take us on that journey of a reflection, I'd like to invite Danai Maniatis, she is the Senior Policy and Technical Advisor for the UN REDD program at UNDP. Danai, over to you, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all got a quick cup of coffee between our two sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers, colleagues and friends in the room, I am delighted to be able to participate in the first Asia-Pacific Global Landscape Forum here in Kyoto today. GLF Kyoto 2019, as we have heard, is focusing on sustainable landscapes as a critical part of the climate solution. And as we all know, forests are a key to avoid the most severe impacts of climate change. Nature-based climate solutions can deliver more than a third of the cost-effective CO2 mitigation needed through 2030. Within this, reducing deforestation provides the single largest opportunity to generate emissions reductions. The single largest opportunity. So, REDD+, let's look at this journey of 10 years. It's a good moment for reflection. I am often asked whether REDD+, the acronym for reducing emissions from deforestation, forest degradation, and the role of conservation, enhancement of forest carbon stocks, and sustainable management of forests, it is a mouthful, is a success or a failure? To answer this question, I invite you to take a quick whirlwind journey with me looking back at the last 10 years. Let us rewind all the way to 2005, the 11th session of the Conference of Parties in Montreal. Talks on reducing emissions from deforestation in developing countries began with a proposal on the issue by Papua New Guinea and Costa Rica, a country also from this region. A few years later, in 2008 in Bali, a major decision to stimulate action on reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation in developing countries was adopted by the COP. In following years, text continued to be adopted on REDD+. It was one of the fastest tracks of the climate change negotiations, and it led to including a specific article of REDD+ in the Paris Agreement. Now, while the international policy arena was laying the groundworks, several multilateral programs, including the UN REDD program, organizations and donors started to support countries in REDD+ readiness, implementation, and working towards results-based payments. It was not a streamlined and straightforward process. But then again, how could it be? If it would have been so easy, we would have already solved the issues around the complex land sector during the negotiations leading up to the Kyoto Protocol. Over the last 10 years, important lessons have been learned and incorporated into the REDD+ readiness and implementation processes. I would like to share 4 of those with you today, which will also be touched upon by our panelists. First, the need to work across different areas of government, ministries of agriculture, ministries of finance and economy, and not only our forest and environment ministries, if REDD+ implementation is really to tackle the drivers and barriers to change. Second, the importance of finding synergies across scales from national to jurisdictional and state, all the way to small project level, and finding ways to link those levels in a reinforcing manner. It's not an easy task. Third, the crucial role of indigenous peoples and local communities in protecting our forests cannot be overstated. And last but not least, the need to build partnerships with private sector entities, be those banks, commodity companies, international financial institutions, and so forth. We really need them on board. 10 years down the line, there are 4 countries, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, and Malaysia, that have posted their results to the UNFCCC REDD+ Information Hub. Earlier this year, Indonesia also announced results, and the government of Norway has agreed to pay for those. And last but not least, again, this year in 2019, the first REDD+ results-based payments under the Green Climate Fund were approved for Brazil. So of the 5 countries that have reported or announced REDD+ results, 2 are in this part of the world. And several other countries in Asia Pacific are very close to reporting REDD+ results. So in conclusion, is REDD+ a story of success or failure? Well, I will let you make up your own mind after hearing from the panelists today. For me personally, and for the UN REDD program, it's a story of success. True, it has perhaps not been the quick and cheap win that many originally envisaged, and mistakes were made. But it is starting to bear fruits, and now is the time, more than ever, to come together, find synergies across sectors, scales, peoples and institutions to speed up and make a REDD+ bull run, to use a cryptocurrency term. As we kick off the panel to learn about the stories of moving REDD+ from theory to implementation, I would like to share this quote from Theodore Roosevelt with you. I hope the PowerPoint shows up. There we go. It's called The Man in the Arena. I just called it The Man in the Arena. It's an important correction. And while you're reading this quote, and while the panelists come up, hats off to all of you that have been part of this arena and are fighting hard to make REDD+ a success. To the critics out there, and many of you are friends and respected colleagues, we embrace your constructive criticism and will continue to strive to do better. I also invite you to come and join us in the REDD+ arena and be part of the fight. I hope you will all enjoy our panel session today and look forward to interacting with you. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Denai. And without further delay, I'd like to turn it over to Emmanuela Shinta. She is the Regional Advisor for Forest and Climate Change with UN Environment. and in Asia and the Pacific for our panel discussion, and also our 3 representatives from Malaysia, Myanmar, and Vietnam. Emmeline, over to you.
Thank you, Selina. Okay, so good morning. I'm very pleased to be moderating this panel today. We will be reflecting on the REDD+ journey over the last 10 years, what we've learned, what has changed, what has been achieved. Our 3 guests are active members of the REDD+ community in the Asia-Pacific region. They contribute directly to designing and implementing REDD+ in their respective countries. We have Dr. Elizabeth Liz Philip, who is the REDD+ focal point for the Malaysian government, and also a very active voice within the international REDD+ community. Ms. No E. Min, Director of POINT, Promotion of Indigenous and Nature Together, which is an NGO active in the national REDD+ process in Myanmar, and EE is also Executive Council member of Asia-Pacific Indigenous People Pact. And finally, Dr. Nguyen Dinh Hung, who is head of Forest Inventory Planning Institute in Vietnam, and who was the main developer of the forest reference level in Vietnam. So thank you very much for joining us. Let me start with a slightly personal question. We've heard Emmanuela's powerful testimony, so I'd like to hear a bit about your personal trajectory towards forest and climate change, and how you've landed in the field of REDD+. So EE, would you like to start?
Yes, good morning everyone. Back in 2010, I was attending the very first meeting invited by the government in Naypyidaw. It was on REDD+. And with a wrong way, I entered into the VIP room and got a seat beside the Director General of Forest Department. And it was the beginning of my engagement with REDD+, that indigenous people working together with government on REDD+. And later I got a chance to be engaged in the REDD+ safeguard analysis for my country context. Then also part of facilitation for the indigenous people engagement in REDD+. And now I'm currently become part of the Policy Executive Board of UN REDD program in the REDD+ in our country, and trying to bring the grassroots voices, especially indigenous people voices, in the policy making process of REDD+ in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I would see my involvement as accidental, and having gone through and understood what REDD+ is, I think REDD+ builds a synergy between federal, state governments, between the different policies, climate change, biodiversity, and forestry policy for us. And a third element, if you like, is basically meeting the expectations of the different stakeholders. Often we connect just to the forestry sector, but sometimes we also have to look outside the forestry sector because you're increasing ambition.
Good morning. I would like to thank you very much for inviting me to this event, and I'm very glad to be here today to share you my experience with REDD+. My first experience with REDD+ was in 2010, and at that time I was invited by the REDD program to participate in the MRP technical working group and the National REDD+ Network. This group is responsible for the technical issue related to EPRA and MRP for REDD+. And at that time, this concept was very new to me. During the implementation of REDD in Vietnam, my institute was assigned to take lead on the establishment of the National April, and I was assigned as the leader of the PP team. With the technical support from international community, we were able to complete our National April and submitted it in 2016, and the technical assessment complete in 2017. This marked a milestone for implementing REDD in Vietnam. Besides April development, I am also involving in the design and implementation of the MRV for REDD+. Now, looking back to 9 years ago, I found that my knowledge on April and MRV for REDD+ had largely improved. Since Vietnam is one of the countries most affected by climate change, through implementing REDD+, I hope that I can make a small contribution to the global effort on mitigating climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Han. Well, thank you, because I think this introduction is useful and reflects well the diverse experiences and range of expertise required to design and implement REDD+ in country. Now, my next question is about your main takeaways after 10 plus years of REDD+. So, Danae explained how we went from theory to result-based payments today in several countries. So, in your view, in your personal views, what has worked and what perhaps could have been a bit better? Okay, Dr. Han, would you like to start?
Thank you. Since my specialty is on forest inventory, I would like to talk about what we have learned on the forest inventory aspect. Vietnam had conducted the forest inventory and assessment very early, which the first one was back in 1976. And by 1990, Vietnam already have forest cover data at 3 tampons. And with this data, it became obvious that there were a serious decline in our national forest cover. Recognize the importance of forest monitoring data. The government have approved a national forest inventory NFI program started from 1991 with a 5-year cycle. This is a multi-purpose program and have served the forestry sector mainly in 3 aspects. The first aspect is that the forest monitoring data have helped policy makers to formulating policy in the forestry sector. For example, when facing the serious decline of forest cover prior to 1990, the government have issued a nationwide ban on logging of natural forests. And at the same time, the government have launched 2 large-scale tree planting campaign, the program 327 and program 661, which is very famous and also known as the 5 million hectare reforestation program. And with this effort, the forest cover chain in Vietnam have been reversed, and from 1995, the forest cover in Vietnam steadily increasing, and from 28%, and now recently reaching 41%. And the second aspect is the forest monitoring data have helped the local authority to make a plan on forest protection and also to design the detailed reforestation program. For example, the location and area of barren and poor forest have been used to determine the location and area of reforestation activity in the field. And the third aspect is that forest monitoring data have helped policymakers and also local authority to get the feedback from their action. And when REDD Plus emerged, the government of Vietnam have supported and actively participating in this initiative, and we have reached some milestones, including the submission of April. And it should be emphasized that the April have used historical data from our NFI. However, we could not include in our April the carbon stop chain in redwood and litter, because at the beginning when we decided our NFI, we didn't know about the importance of redwood and litter. So my through implementing REDD Plus, we have learned that when you design a multi-purpose NFI, besides taking into account the current information need, you also need to take into account potential information need in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hung, for this exposé on, I think, very fast and very clear on the key importance of forest monitoring data. Liz, would you like to share some thoughts?
For us, we had to speak a common language between federal and subnational government, and the unifying words that we could use, or technical word, was sustainable forest management. That's something very comfortable to the policymakers, to the technical people. So that's where we actually talked to the states and we got our buy-in. That was how we brought REDD Plus and how we looked at the implementation of REDD Plus. So that's a very positive outcome, if you like, and that's how we scaled up the implementation. I also like to share the not so good story about REDD Plus. I think that's also, in our implementation, lessons learned, in the sense that we have disparity between subnational governments. Some subnational governments are rich, whereas others are not so rich. And they also look at the forests for their growth. So how do we balance this? So that's the difficult part when you're telling them, no, you have a cap, you can't cut more than what you could. You have to leave some in the name of climate change, or REDD Plus, or biodiversity, or forest management, whatever you call them. So that's something that was difficult, but we see REDD Plus could actually harmonize all these different needs and speak to the states, to the subnational governments that did not see an opportunity for them to reduce their cuts or even to reduce deforestation and forest degradation. So REDD Plus stood in the gap for this reduced economy or revenue for them.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about Malaysia choosing to focus on sustainable management of forests as one of the 5 REDD Plus activities?
That's the common language. That's why we used REDD Plus. We used sustainable forest management. That's where our strength was. having reduced our deforestation in the 1970s, 80s by addressing poverty. So 1990 onwards, 1992 onwards, we focused on SFM. Actually, Malaysia is the first tropical country to have a pilot FSC certified forest. So it's from then onwards we've been moving on. And we think, if I may just add, we think without SFM, you cannot reduce your deforestation and forest degradation, because that's where your livelihood is maintained.
Thank you. EE, please.
Throughout the 10 years of preparation for REDD Plus readiness in our country, I have seen that because our country has a long history of broken relationship and trust between government and many indigenous people groups, there are more and multi-stakeholder dialogue happening throughout the process and building trust and started relationship. At the same time, changes in law and policy process, acknowledging and including indigenous people rights, especially FPIC, and also like with the recent biodiversity bylaw, inclusion of recognition for community protected area, and there are more transparent information about what is going on with forest management in our country, so that we can give our recommendation, our voices to those processes. And last but not least, there are also engagement process started with the ethnic arm organization, because they are also one of the key players in the coming federalism discussion in our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think yes, of course, because you're involved both at grassroots and policy levels in the context of REDD+, so that's very valuable experience. Okay, we're moving to my last question to our panelists today. I'd like to now look forward and ask you, what's your vision for the future of REDD+ in your country or in this region or beyond? Where would you like to be in 10 years' time? So, yeah?
Yes. We now have a REDD+ safeguard in our country, as well as a strategy. So what's important now, what has written in the paper should become in implementation. And this implementation should also have trust and acknowledgement of indigenous people's role in their forest protection, and especially indigenous community conserved area recognition is what we indigenous people interest in forest management and REDD+ engagement throughout the process. Another thing is law enforcement in our country. Because of country situation in the past, for illegal logging and those things to be successful for sustainable forest management, that is very important. And at the moment, our country is changes to democratic country, so there is a need for policy coordination and government land ministry coordination, especially REDD+ should link to SDG, climate change, and also land issue of our country. For indigenous people, land is life. It's very important. With the NDC commitment of our country, we really have a concern of green grabbing for indigenous people land, because we are staying in the forest and we already have a lot of land grabbing problem in the past, and we really hope that this kind of initiative in our country will not have negative impact for indigenous people land right. And for that, we need a higher political support. And because I'm indigenous woman, I also want to say that indigenous women in our country, we have barrier both from socially constructive norm as well as culturally constructive norm. That's why I want to end up with saying that no woman, no peace, no land, no peace, and also no right, no REDD in our country. Thank you.
Personally, I believe that in the future, REDD will play an important role in achieving the target of the Paris Agreement to limit the increase in the global temperature to below 2 degrees Celsius. In the Asia-Pacific region, I believe that REDD+ will be an effective means for forest protection and development. About the future of REDD+ in Vietnam, I would like to raise a potential issue for your consideration. As mentioned before, Vietnam has quite unique national circumstances about the forestry sector that we have since 1995. We have reversed the forest cover trend, and therefore, in order to get benefit from REDD+, we need to include also forest degradation and plus part of REDD+ in our April and MRP. And because monitoring forest degradation and restoration is more difficult than monitoring forest deforestation, so the uncertainty will be higher. Moreover, the historical data in the past might have low quality and even be biased by political purpose. So this fact might cause a high uncertainty in our April, and this level of uncertainty might even higher than the result of implementing REDD+. So there's a risk that the MRP for REDD+ in Vietnam will show no positive result, and if this happens, the government of Vietnam might not be enthusiastic to invest in REDD+ anymore, and this in turn led to very little result or even no result for REDD+ and no additional money to invest back to forest protection and development. So if this issue happen in reality, I hope that all of you here might help us to find a solution for this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, please.
Yeah, for us, we see REDD+ would build our ambition, contribute towards our ambition that forest is a natural capital instead of a commodity. You see, so that's a transition that we are taking, and we believe every time when the government needs to develop a land, forests should be considered just not for the price of the land, but what it holds. So the full cost need to be included in future development projects, or even the current. We are embarking in a few mega projects, and we want that to be reflected. So we have spoken that, and that message has gone across to the top management of the country and at the political level. Besides that, we think two things is quite important. REDD+ will help build resilience in the forest sector, for climate change in particular, through connecting different forest types. We have problems with fragmented forest areas. So our forest reserves are fragmented, so we want to build connectivity. So that's one thing that we think the REDD+ in the next 10 years will build this path. And the other one is to look at sustainability, looking at both the agricultural sector as well as the forest sector, building sustainability in both the sectors and moving towards 100% sustainably produced products from the forest sector. So basically REDD Plus would be contributing to this, and we hope to bring this forward. Oh, and the third one is to increase protected areas. So we want to increase our protected areas. We have a target of 20%. Total landmass would be protected area, and now we are between 10 to 12%. So it's a far way to go. So that's something that the REDD Plus will contribute. So that's what we think REDD Plus in the next 10 years for Malaysia will be.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And so this is the end. I want to thank you one more time because I think you've given the audience really a good idea of the many different and issues and pieces you have to put together to make REDD Plus a success. And the work is done by people like you. So thank you so much. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellen, Dr. Hook, and Liz. Now let's get a bit closer to the ground. And for this next segment, we will have Duchelle, the senior scientist from C4, who will help us to unpack these phrases that we've been hearing of late in the last couple of years, jurisdictional sustainability. And she will share some emerging lessons, and then we will hear from the practitioners on the ground what the experience has been like.
Great, thank you so much, Selena. It's been a pleasure for C4 to co-organize this session with you and REDD. And this is the second piece before lunch. And what we're doing now is delving into a pretty interesting aspect of REDD Plus that's gotten a lot of attention in recent years, and this is what's known as jurisdictional approaches. So I want to start by saying that a lot of this session is inspired by work that C4 has been conducting with Earth Innovation Institute and the Governor's Climate and Forest Task Force, including the State of Jurisdictional Sustainability Report that we published last year, as well as work in this Transforming REDD book. In the end of the book, there's a section on evolving initiatives, and there's a chapter on jurisdictional approaches where we talk about kind of this new direction for REDD Plus. So what are jurisdictional approaches? Do we really need another term in this world? Well, interestingly, jurisdictional approaches are quite distinct in that they're government-led, wall-to-wall approaches for protecting forests, restoring forests, reducing emissions, and improving livelihoods. And they resemble landscape approaches in their holistic nature, but the key difference is that the landscape is defined by politically relevant boundaries. And this is important because it allows a clear link to the policy and regulatory context. So jurisdictional approaches can happen at national levels, but interestingly, there's a convergence on this subnational level. So states, provinces, districts, municipalities, in terms of implementers of jurisdictional approaches. And that's happened because a lot of these subnational governments have distinct responsibilities for land use and forest governance. They're laboratories for policy innovation. Sometimes they can move more quickly than national governments. And in big countries, these governments are closer to the farmers and communities who are making land use decisions. And in countries that are going the wrong way, such as the United States, Brazil, and others, at the national level, subnational governments are still going ahead with climate action. I mean, look at California, look at the state of Acre and Mato Grosso in Brazil. So they provide a really important scale of action to meet these challenges. So several of us were at the Governor's Climate and Forest Task Force meeting and the Tropical Forest Alliance meetings. They were back-to-back meetings in Colombia over the last 2 weeks. And jurisdictional approaches are at the core of these initiatives. So the Governor's Climate and Forest Task Force is a large network of states and provinces across the tropics who are leading the way in these jurisdictional approaches. And the Tropical Forest Alliance is an alliance of private companies, governments, and civil society who are actively seeking to reduce deforestation from key commodity supply chains, namely palm oil, beef, soy, and pulp and paper. And together, they're really seeing, jurisdictional approaches as a way for REDD+, climate finance, these sustainable commodity initiatives, as well as domestic action coming together in these comprehensive approaches. So given all of that attention, we've been working with our partners to truly try to understand, so what's happening across the tropics in terms of these jurisdictional approaches. So now I'm going to try to switch the slide, and I don't know how to do it, sorry. Sorry, I don't really know how to use this, so yeah. Oh, there we go, okay. So basically this work that we're presenting is, it was in 39 states and provinces across the tropics. The green are the Governor's Climate and Forest Task Force members. The blue are non-members, but states and provinces that are pursuing similar strategies to reducing deforestation. And some of the key findings of that, I can't move this. Yeah. They encompass 28% of tropical forests. So what happens in these places actually does matter for the future of our forests. 19 of the 39 reduced deforestation relative to their forest reference emission levels. And 38 of the 39, actually all of them have formal commitments to reducing deforestation, and 38 of the 39 actually have concrete actions for meeting those pledges. And so these actions, they importantly correspond to 6.8 gigatons of avoided carbon emissions, and the total carbon stock in these areas is 69.2 gigatons. So again, really important implications for climate in these forests. So, and we also found in the study, though, an important global disconnect. So, more than 470 companies have made commitments to sustainable sourcing through the New York Declaration on Forests, through the Consumer Goods Forum, and these 39 jurisdictions have made formal commitments to reducing deforestation, but there's actually only 5 formal partnerships between companies and governments in all of these areas. And so this is really important. How do we get companies and governments together? There's a lot of goodwill, there's a lot of good intention, but how can we actually move this forward? So our panel today is going to focus on that issue. If we can go to the next slide. So we're asking here, how can we help connect jurisdictions and companies that are striving to reduce tropical deforestation and degradation? And we have 3 really interesting speakers representing different aspects of this. We start with Gita Syahrani. She's the Executive Director of the Indonesian Sustainable Districts Association. This is local governments, district heads, bupatis who are working towards jurisdictional approaches, and she's facilitating this effort in Indonesia. We have Ms. Kohori Miyake, who's the Executive Officer of Customer Service and Communications of AEON, which is one of the largest Japanese retailers with presence all over the Asia region. She's going to give us the private sector perspective. They've made a lot of important sustainability commitments. So what are some of the challenges of implementing those? And then finally, we have Juan Ardilla, who's a scientist at Earth Innovation Institute. We've been working together on this study, but Juan is also developing platforms and initiatives that can help governments and companies come together in a bit of a matchmaking through information and monitoring. So let's start with Gita. This is one of the most exciting things happening with tropical forest governance worldwide. So let's let Gita take it away.
Thank you very much, Amy. Almost lunch. Good almost lunch, everybody. We're not going to spend too much, essentially, but I don't know how to also operate the clicker. So I'll start. Basically, we start from the question of, can we actually incentivize politically elected leaders to push for sustainability? It starts from a journey that begins in 2015 when they one of the Packard Foundation commissioned one of the research in Indonesia that constitute this conclusion. Right now in Indonesia, there is very limited incentives for district government, essentially local politicians, to push for sustainability. Now the question is, can we actually change that situation? Can we actually build collective actions in district level of Indonesia? Can we actually provide Emmanuela and the Kalimantan forest to the healthy state that it actually deserves? LTKL is a close-knit network of district governments. So district government is, in Indonesia, you have national and then province and then district level. But district level does not have full mandate to control forest area. However, people that lives in the area actually reports to the district. So you have a conflict between managing one area that is not actually under your umbrella and managing the people of the area, which is under your umbrella. So how do you actually balance those two? Now, I'd like to actually bring 3 examples of district cases in Indonesia. The first one being the district of Sigi in Central Sulawesi. That is actually a green jewel in Central Sulawesi that houses the national park of Lorelindu. Can we go to the video, please? Maybe press play. Go back to the video, maybe press play. Sorry. Yeah. If somebody can help play the video. Yeah, so the reason why I wanted to play this video is because you can actually literally see the sound and the voices of the forest itself, so you'll be able to be transformed in Indonesia's forest. And the forest that is featured in this video is actually 450 years old, and it's 20 minutes from the airport of Palu. And right now, they're being faced with this catastrophic disasters of liquefaction and also tsunami. But what is interesting is that this forest actually survives. And the people surrounding the forest have stronger resilience than others. And this actually proves how people essentially can benefit out of having a sustainable ecosystem. And even if politicians do not have the incentives to actually push for sustainability, their people, essentially their constituent, can prove otherwise. So, okay, let's just skip it. So this basically reflects the structure of LTKL right now. It spans over the Kalimantan, Sumatra, and Sulawesi island, and it represents around 10 active districts. It's actually formally established back in 2017, and it's based on 3 pillars of declaration, which is SDGs, the emission reduction, and principles of open government. The reason why the districts actually commit themselves to this declaration is because the National Action Plan of Indonesia actually obliged district government to do so. Essentially, district government right now, since 2018, will have to report their SDGs performance, not only looking at state contribution, but also non-state actors' contribution. So what's interesting about this scenario is actually when you look at LTKL as a district coalition, it actually represents around 22,000 kilometer squares and 52 kilometer squares of forest and 55 kilometer squares of peat, which is almost twice the size of Kansai area. So you can imagine the size of it. And by 2018, the district government agrees that they want to focus on things that are related to land use, essentially because of their locations. And I noticed that I stressed out the point of sustainable commodities becoming the umbrella of the rest of the points, which is prevention of fire, social forestry and agrarian reform, conservation restoration, and also clean energy. Because essentially, the district have decided if you look at cross-commodities transformation of supply chain, you'll be able to actually address the 4 other issues. Now, let us go to a case study in Siak, which is the province of Riau, that is highlighted by a few of our colleagues before. Now, because Amy says the problem of disconnect between what local governments is committing to what private sectors are committing, we actually help district government members of LTKL to actually pinpoint what are the backbone elements that they can work on. Number 1 is the database. how can they have a good database that reflects their current conditions? The second one is the regulatory framework. How can they translate national regulations and global framework into district regulation? The third is on planning and budgeting. How do you integrate your commitment on SDGs on emission reduction into the planning and budgeting of your districts? And most importantly is actually the multi-stakeholders partnership. The district of Siak is interesting because right now they've gone through a political change in which the head of the district previously got elected into the governor of Riau. So now not only you have a green vision in Siak as a district, but you have a chance to actually influence the entire province of Riau to becoming a green province. Now, LTKL have worked with them through three joint programs. Number one is the Regional Competitiveness Framework. Essentially, this is to help them define what is sustainable districts. The second one is the Masterclass of Sustainable Investment, and this is how to help them construct understandable and visible investment portfolio on sustainable commodities. And the third is to build sustainable district narrative. And the reason why we construct the programs into these three main pillars are because we want to connect between performance package and incentives package. Essentially, this is a result of a summary that we did with 7 companies that have expressed their interest to work with Siak. And what they want to look at from a sustainable jurisdiction such as Siak represent these 5 core elements. Number 1 is forest, number 2 is peat, number 3 is forest and peat fire, number 4 is community rights, and number 5 is community-based economy. So essentially this is what the district of Siak needs to work on, at least until 5 years ahead. But at the same time, we want to work with this private sector to also identify what are the incentive package that private sector can actually provide for the district so that it can incentivize politically excellent leaders again. And the 5 things that we thought, and I would love to actually listen from Ion also, their opinion, is these 5 things are possible. You can do a joint programs with private sector. You can do a trade volume increase. You can actually do long-term contracts. You can actually provide new investment for the district. And the 5th, you can actually talk about premium price for the smallholders. So out of these 5 elements, can this actually be implemented in the district of Siak? We still don't know. We are in the trial process right now. We actually look until 2030 to become the year where we actually prove whether sustainable jurisdictions is the way to go, whether this is something that can be replicated nationwide. But quoting the word of Emmanuela, this is the time to act. There is no reason why we have to stop. There is no reason why we cannot be optimistic, because this is already happening on the ground. Thank you very much. My name is Gita Syahrani.
Thank you so much, Gita. That was excellent. I mean, I think you really highlighted with this Riau example of the district to the provincial level connection. And I mean, this is the challenge for jurisdictional approaches, how to do this cross-level coordination. And so there's a lot of interesting lessons that can be learned here. We'll move to Ms. Miyake to talk about Ian's experience in sustainability commitments.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kamori Miyake from Ion. We are a retailer in Japan, one of the largest. And I'm feeling a little bit awkward because the audience that I face is totally different from my usual work. But I'll try to explain a little bit about, I introduce our group and our initiatives in terms of sustainable sourcing. This is an overview of our group. We are, as I said, the largest retailer in Japan. We're based in Japan, but we have operations throughout the Asian countries, 14 countries in Asia, most of the countries. And we have, in most countries, we have food supermarket stores and also shopping centers, financial credit card business, and so forth. Well, I would like to point out that we have 3.6 billion customers per year. That is, we would like to think that as one of the largest assets that we have. And we also have 560,000 employees throughout these operations. This is our basic principle. We call it a triangle internally. We have customer in the center, as any of the other companies do. But I like the word peace on top of the sitting on the head of the triangle, which is sort of awkward for a supermarket to say ask for peace. But we can't really talk about peace without going through the environmental issues as well these days, and I think it's one of the most important thing is the environmental issues when it comes to peace. So I like that, peace sitting on top of the triangle. Under the principle, basic principle, we have sustainability principle. This is what it says. Well, pretty much says that we will think about the environment and the social issues. But under this sustainability principle, we have a decarbonization vision for 2050 that we have announced that we will try to go zero emission by the end of 2050, which is a long way to go. But we also have a concrete midterm target for 2030, and we are currently working on all the store operations and so forth to hit that target. Of course, this is not exactly enough when you think about 1.5 degrees target that BCC says now. But as for now, we are committed to make that target. Under that, we also have sustainable procurement goals for 2020. This, you don't have to go through the numbers, details, figures, but I just wanted to point out that we have agricultural products, livestock, fishery, paper pulp, and timber, and palm oil, different areas of the products that because we have a large scale, wide range of assortment within our stores. 50% of our sales comes from food, but we also have apparel products and also household products. So pretty much we have laid out each target, concrete target for each areas, which our buyers didn't really like it at first, but we had to make a target so that people will start actually putting their acts together, and that's why I insisted on having a target. I'll talk about the palm oil situation later, but depending on the area, some areas are faster than other areas. Marine products are pretty good in keeping up its pace. For our private brand sales, I think close to 20% of our sales is already all certified as MSC or ASC, so it's a sustainable sourcing. And I think I'd like to say that this is another piece, important part of our role as a retailer who has a direct contact with customers every day. This is a sales floor which shows which we call it fish button, but this whole section is only from the products with sustainable sourcing. So this is a good message that we can convey to our customers that everything you pick up from this sales shelf is okay. It's sustainable sourced. So, and we want the customers to come and think and realize that, there's a whole section that they can contribute. They can make the right choice in everyday life, and I think that's very important. So, FSC, paper products, timber products, we would like to say we're very close to getting to the 100% FSC certified materials for our private brand. So we're happy about that. Also another, the same thing as marine products, I think it's very important for us to communicate to the customers the idea of sustainability, the idea of sourcing, responsible sourcing and responsible products. So these are things that we do at the event, and we try to communicate with the customers. Another example, just as an example, but our convenience store operations have now using FSC certified timber for their stores, which hopefully that we will eventually can be able to expand it to a larger scale. Right now we're having a little bit difficulty in terms of cost and supply, but eventually we would like to get there. Also, palm oil, this is a relatively new movement in Japan, but I would like to point out that we all have started, and since it's a very difficult process, palm oil is just one ingredient, and it's very difficult to convey to the customer because it's such a small part of that product, but we still like to work together with the supply chain, with the manufacturers, with the people who manufacture. And these are Japanese initiatives, but I think it's a start where we all, everybody in the supply chain get together and work towards the same goal, and we also need to include the customers. So it's a first step, not the end, but we have taken the steps to communicate with the customers and studying about the whole issues related. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And this is from a retailer who's pretty far away from, very downstream from the districts that are actually producing a lot of these products. So important commitments here, important action on the ground. How do we connect these things? And so that's where we get to Juan Ardila, who's going to talk about some initiatives that are trying to connect local governments, jurisdictions, and companies and retailers.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Amy, and thank you for the GLF organizers for giving us this opportunity to be here. We are very excited, actually, to be sharing with you one idea that we are calling the Tropical for the Champions idea. And this is basically a space for us to invite you to participate on this and to help us in shaping this idea. So this is the first time we're going to talk about this idea. It's been like 2 years in the making, and inside the GCF, or the Global Climate Forest Governance Task Force that Amy already introduced. So I'll just take you on the basic elements of this idea, and let's see if you think it's a good or a bad idea. So the first thing, or the first element of this, is commitments. Very often we see that there is a region, state, or a district that politically or engage on sustainability. We just heard from Gita, there are 10 districts in Indonesia that say to the world, we want to engage in sustainability. But what happens? Not much happens. Not very much. There is some speech, there is an announcement maybe, and that's it. And the idea is that we need to be creative, we need to be daring. We need to tell the world that these places represent, as we have said many times already in the morning or during the morning, 1/3 of the climate solution. And then we need to move on and reward those jurisdictions. First, have recognition and then reward them. And we not only focus, part of the message you have been hearing when working with the tropical governments is that we should not only reward those that are at the top of the race, like Mato Grosso, Acre, or some places in Indonesia, but also recognize and support those places that are at the beginning of the race, that have limited resources to embark on this dialogue and to change their business as usual activities. So the first thing is support for those commitments. And then we move to actions. And there are many things we can do, but I'm just going to highlight 2. The first one is to create entry points. When we talk with the private sector, we often hear that they don't know how to collaborate. They know that sustainability is important. But the private sector, companies, investors, are already busy creating very good products to make our life more comfortable or producing services for us. So now, asking them also to engage in sustainability dialogues is not easy. Many of those companies, if we want to have not 10 companies, but hundreds of companies engaged in sustainability, need guidance. We need to be better at telling those companies, the private sector, what are those places that they need to support? What are those initiatives that they can support? And in talking again with the governments, I'm not only talking about export commodities like coffee, cocoa, bean, or soy, but also small products or more exotic products. We heard this morning about forest products. I'm talking about fruits and nuts. I'm talking about fish also. So those sort of exotic products that in the end also have a larger potential to benefit smallholders. And that's where the poverty of our world is concentrated today. Sorry, I went too fast. The second one is trust. The second action that we need is trust. Today, the private sector has a feeling that there is a reputational risk when they invest on tropical places. And we need to be good at telling that yes, we are losing forests at a fast rate, but also many great things are being done or are taking place in those places. And we need to highlight those efforts, those initiatives, those pilot projects, so that we create trust. We need to have a frank and open conversation with governments, with the private sector, and campaigning groups to create safe zones. Zones where the private sector is not afraid to invest. And then I move to the third stage, which is results. I mean, we need results, and soon, now. So, we're talking here of holding companies, holding governments accountable for their pledges. And today, we have data. I mean, my professional background is data scientist. We have plenty of data. For example, to monitor forests, we have reliable data on a yearly basis on what's happening on the forest areas. And not only global products, we have regional products like we get from Vietnam. At the sub-national level, we have very good, accurate data that can tell us what's happening with those places. And even we have early warning systems. We saw JFAST that tell us on a daily, continuous basis what's happening with those forests. So we can create monitoring systems, and we can also target other indicators. We can have, today we have very good data at the subnational level on agricultural production, agricultural productivity, agricultural area, some other key indicators like literacy rate, poverty, human development index, and key sensitive indicators like the ease of doing business, and all of this is happening at the subnational level. So we are not talking about setting up very complex or very expensive monitoring systems, but very simple ones with all those things that are already available and that already exist on the ground. And then we have a green jurisdiction as the idea. Winners, we cannot have losers. We cannot have a few farmers that benefit or that are promoted. Everyone in the jurisdictions, private sector, governments, institutions need to be winners in this. This is just one example of a monitoring system that has been already for 2 years and is being developed. It's a GCF Impact Platform. Here we have a very complete catalog of data sets, indicators that tell us what's happening in tropical forest regions. Here we cover 1/3 of the areas. Just one example, I invite you to go to gcfimpact.org and see how this sort of monitoring system that I was referring to before can be implemented. This is just the example of Mato Grosso. If you go there, you will see we have key indicators on environment, agriculture, livestock, social indicators, and a few catalog of investment opportunities. It's a serious business, a serious task for all of us to come up with this business portfolio for each of the jurisdictions that can help smallholders and also promote sustainability. So that's the idea. That's the idea. It's been in the making. I mean, this idea is taking shape now. We have been already working on this for 2 years, and now we go more open, more public. We want to collaborate with GCF states, but also districts and all sort of regions, jurisdictions that are engaged in sustainability with the private sector. We really want to engage. We want to here. This is a multi-stakeholder approach. It's a bottom-up approach. Something that we believe is that it will have an implementation which is particular or tailored to each region, to each country, reflecting on the diversity of our world and the concrete challenges that we have. So I invite you to visit forestchampions.org. I will not go to the website now, just invite you to go there, send us an email and let us know if you have any comments, suggestions, if you want to be part of this idea. We are really excited and we want to hear many voices on this. Thank you.
Thank you
so much. I mean, we are not going to achieve our goals of reducing tropical deforestation without engaging the private sector. And I can tell you, we were just at this Tropical Forest Alliance meeting hearing from companies who are in panic, actually, because all of their sustainability commitments are for 2020. They're largely not going to meet those goals. But it's a lot of these issues like they don't know how to engage. There's a lot of risk. Some of the important environmental organizations are actually attacking them anytime they come out of the woodwork to try and do something. So there are challenges, but this is actually, because of this sort of 2020 year, it's not going to end there, but there's a lot of desire on the part of the private sector to act and to engage, and there's a lot actually happening on the ground. And so what we're trying to do, I mean, C4 is a research organization. We're critical about what we're seeing and analyzing, but we're also trying to tell some positive stories. We were with journalists yesterday in a scientist-journalist workshop, and we actually came to consensus among that group. There's so much bleak news out there. Let's try to tell some positive stories that are based on evidence and that are real, but that are also helping change some of this narrative. So thank you so much to the panelists, and thank you to you and REDD again for including us. Thank you.